There is a man whose ideas have quietly shaped almost everything we think we know about the human mind. You may have heard his name, Carl Jung, but most people who have heard his name have never actually understood his ideas. They've seen the word shadow thrown around on social media. They've heard the term inner child. They've seen personality tests claiming to be based on his work. But the real ideas, the ones that actually change how you understand yourself, most people have never encountered them until now. In the next few minutes, I want to give you something that most people spend years searching for without finding. A clear, honest, simple map of what Carl Jung actually believed and why it matters more right now than at any other point in history. Because once you understand Jung, you will never see yourself or the people around you the same way again. Part 1. Who was Carl Jung? Carl Gustav Jung was born in 1875 in a small village in Switzerland. He was a quiet, strange, deeply interior child, the kind of child who spent more time in his own mind than in the world around him. He became a psychiatrist, not a philosopher sitting in a library, not a theorist building abstract systems, a doctor who sat across from real people, people who had lost their minds, people who had lost their marriages, people who had lost their sense of who they were. And he tried, with everything he had, to understand what was actually happening beneath the surface of their suffering. Early in his career, he became the most important student of Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis. Freud saw Jung as his heir, the person who would carry his work into the future. But Jung couldn't stay in Freud's shadow. He believed Freud was too narrow, too focused on sexuality as the root of all psychological problems, too dismissive of the deeper layers of the human mind. So in 1912, Jung broke with Freud. It was one of the most significant intellectual separations in history. Freud never forgave him, and Jung fell into the deepest crisis of his life. He lost his most important mentor. He lost his professional community. He lost his sense of direction. And so he did something that most people never do. He turned inward. He began to explore his own unconscious, deliberately, courageously, without knowing what he would find. He recorded his visions. He drew images of what he saw in his dreams. He wrote conversations with the figures that appeared in his imagination. He called this period his confrontation with the unconscious. And what came out of that darkness was everything. A completely new map of the human psyche. One that nobody had ever drawn before. One that we are still learning to read today. Part 2. The 3 ideas that make Jung different. Jung developed dozens of profound ideas across his lifetime. But there are 3, just 3, that you need to understand first, because everything else builds on them. The first idea: the unconscious is bigger than you think. Freud believed in the unconscious, the idea that we have thoughts, memories, and desires beneath our awareness that influence our behavior. Jung took that idea and went somewhere Freud never dared to go. He said the unconscious has 2 layers. The first layer is personal. It contains everything from your own life that has been forgotten, suppressed, or ignored. Your wounds, your buried emotions, your unprocessed experiences. All of it. Stored. All of it. Active. All of it. Quietly shaping your choices. But beneath that personal layer, Jung said there is something deeper. Something older. Something that does not belong to you alone. He called it the collective unconscious. And this is where Jung becomes truly extraordinary. The collective unconscious is a layer of the psyche that all human beings share. Not just your family, not just your culture, every human being who has ever lived. Jung noticed something remarkable. Cultures that never had contact with each other, separated by oceans and centuries, told the same stories, feared the same things, dreamed the same images, created the same symbols. Why? Because beneath our individual differences, we share a common psychological inheritance built over millions of years of human evolution, present in every person born into this world. That shared inheritance, that common psychological foundation, is the collective unconscious, and it shapes you in ways you cannot fully see, because it lives beneath everything you are consciously aware of. Visual, deep ocean, stars, ancient cave paintings, the feeling of something vast and old. The second idea, what you don't face, controls you. This is perhaps the most important thing Jung ever said. Inside the unconscious, both personal and collective, lives everything you have refused to acknowledge about yourself. The emotions you were taught were wrong, the desires you were ashamed to admit, the wounds too painful to examine, the qualities you rejected because the world told you they were unacceptable. Jung called this collection of hidden material the shadow, and he said something about the shadow that changes everything. The shadow doesn't disappear. When you ignore it, it gets stronger. It goes underground. It builds pressure in the dark, and it finds ways to come out. In your reactions, in your choices, in your relationships, in the people you are drawn to, in the patterns you cannot seem to escape. Most people spend their entire lives being driven by a shadow they have never once looked at directly. Jung believed that facing the shadow, really facing it honestly and completely, was one of the most important things a human being could ever do. Not because it makes you darker, but because it makes you free. The third idea, the goal of life is wholeness, not happiness. This is the idea that separates Jung from almost every other voice in modern psychology and self-help. Most of what you have been told about psychological growth is about feeling better, about becoming more positive, about healing your wounds so they stop hurting, about finding happiness and maintaining it. Jung said something completely different. He said the deepest drive in every human being, deeper than the drive for pleasure, deeper than the drive for love, deeper even than the drive for survival, is the drive toward wholeness, toward becoming fully, authentically, completely yourself. Not the self your parents needed you to be, not the self your culture approved of, not the self you perform for the world. Your actual self, the whole thing, light and shadow, strength and wound, certainty and mystery. He called this lifelong journey toward wholeness individuation, and he believed that everything in life, including its most painful chapters, was in service of that journey. The betrayals, the losses, the moments of complete destruction, all of it, in Jung's understanding, was the psyche pushing toward something more real, something more complete, something more true. That is not a comfortable idea, but it is a profound one. And for the people who are willing to sit with it, it changes everything about how they understand their own story. Part 3. Why Jung matters now more than ever. Jung died in 1961, more than 60 years ago. So why are millions of people searching for his ideas right now? Why does his work feel more relevant today than when he was alive? Because the problems he was trying to solve have gotten worse, not better. We live in a time of mass disconnection, identity confusion, relationships built on performance rather than genuine intimacy, loneliness that exists even inside constant connection. We have more information about mental health than ever before. More therapy, more medication, more self-help content than any human being could consume in a lifetime. And yet, people are more lost than ever. Because most of what we offer people who are suffering operates only on the surface. It tells people what to do. It tells people how to feel better. It gives people strategies and frameworks and morning routines. But it rarely asks the deeper question. What is the unconscious trying to tell you through this suffering? What is the shadow behind this pattern? What part of yourself are you refusing to face? And how is that refusal creating the very pain you're trying to escape? Those are Jung's questions. And in a world full of surface-level answers, they are the most important questions anyone can ask. This is why his work lives at the center of everything we do on this channel. Not because it is academic, not because it is complicated, because it is honest, because it goes deep enough to actually change something, and because the people who find it, the people who are willing to stop asking for comfort and start asking for truth, those people don't just feel better. They become someone new. Part 4. What this means for you. I want to be direct with you about why you're watching this channel. You didn't find Shadow and Self because you were curious about psychology. You found it because something happened to you. Something that broke a story you were living in. Something that raised questions you couldn't find answers to anywhere else. Maybe it was a betrayal. Maybe it was a pattern you couldn't escape. Maybe it was the slow realization that the life you were living didn't feel like yours. Whatever brought you here, Jung's work is the most honest map I have ever found for navigating what you're carrying. Not because it makes the pain disappear, but because it gives the pain meaning. It takes the confusion, the why did this happen, the why do I keep ending up here, the why can't I just move on, and it turns those questions into a map that leads somewhere, not back to who you were before, forward, into someone more real, someone more complete, someone who knows their own shadow well enough that it can no longer make their choices for them. That is the journey this channel is built on. And it starts with understanding the man who first drew the map. Carl Jung spent his entire life asking one question. What does it mean to become fully yourself? Not the self the world approves of, not the self that performs and pretends and maintains. The real self, the whole self, the self that includes the shadow and the light, the wound and the wisdom, the darkness and the gold. He never fully answered the question. He said himself that individuation, the journey toward wholeness, is never complete. It is a direction, not a destination, but the direction, once you find it, changes everything. In the next video, we go deeper into the shadow, the most important concept in all of Jung's work, and the one most directly connected to why you are here. I'll see you there. Healing is not going back. It's going forward into someone more real.